I'm Jared.
I'm Marcus.
Level with us. Welcome! This is a podcast where we play the same portion of the video game along with our listeners, and then we meet back here to discuss.
Think of it like a book club, but with video games.
And to kick things off, this week we'll be discussing Week 1 of the recently released game Neo: The World Ends With You. Spoilers ahead. Now, I'm not much of an RPG guy, but I really like the original World Ends With You. So we've both definitely been very excited to play the sequel and see what they're doing with the story. But in order to start off our main discussion, Marcus will be summing up what happened this week in the game and the gameplay that we've experienced in a segment I like to call What's Happening? So Marcus, what's happening?
So, it's a regular day in Shibuya when Rindo and his fashionable friend, Fret, get sucked into the Reaper's game, a deadly 7-day-long contest between teams to get a second chance at life. As the week goes on, Rindo and Fret are joined by a mysterious math enthusiast, Sho Minamimoto, and frenetic fangirl Nagiri.
It's just Nagi.
Together they defeat ethereal monsters known as the Noise, solve riddles, and develop and use special powers such as time travel, imprinting thoughts, and diving into people's heads. On the last day of the first week, they confront Suzukichi, the team captain of the Ruin Bringers. They defeat him, but they're disqualified for the week because of a technicality. They're assisted by a mysterious interloper that Suzukichi calls Neku. Now they're back in the game, down one teammate, with questions to boot. Where and who is Rindo's online friend Swallow? Why do the Ruin Bringers keep playing the Reaper's game? Will their saucy rival Canon ever reciprocate Fret's advances? 7 more days may hold the answers.
Oh, wow, very nice. And so this is the very beginning of the game, so this is also introduced just kind of the main battle mechanics and just kind of how we have an idea of how the rest of the game will work out. And so far, I would say this game is very much a sequel. The mechanics all seem to be very similar to the original.
Yeah, for sure. We were kind of talking about this. If a person wanted a sequel for The World Ends With You on the dinky little DS, but on the Nintendo Switch, this is about as faithful as you can get, I would say. Like, there are certain mechanics that you can't really replicate from the DS, and certain mechanics that I don't think you'd want to. Like, there are these things about there are certain pins you can only upgrade if you step away from the DS for a while. And along the same lines for, like, when you eat food, you have to, like, wait real time for your characters to digest it. So those mechanics are gone. Also, I haven't seen Tin Pin Slammer yet. Time will tell if that pops up. But yeah, for sure. Generally, it's taking everything from the first game, and I would say kind of either making it better or staying really faithful to kind of the central ideas of the first game.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the food mechanic being gone and replaced with you just battle to make your hunger meter go down, which I think is just a way better change. But yeah, I've just been surprised, it's been 14 years since the original game. I'm surprised, you never know with a sequel that's this late how many people of the original staff are actually working on it. But it feels like, for better or for worse, like this game absolutely understands what made the original good and captures that. And, we'll just have to see how well it lives up to the original. I'm definitely a fan so far. I've also been a fan of the music. You make a lot of your own music. How do you feel about the music in this game compared to the original?
It's interesting that you ask that. This is something I was actually just thinking about. So the music is very cool. There are a few games I can think of from kind of the time period of the first World Ends With You where a game was like really intrinsically linked identity-wise with its music. I'm sure that there are tons of other examples, but of games I'm familiar with, the music was like very much a part of the style of the original World Ends With You. So it's really cool to hear these updated remixes or versions of those old tracks. I do kind of wish they would do some of these more modern things when it comes to games with soundtracks where they're kind of playing the same songs over and over again. For example, we were playing the indie game Paradise Killer. In that game, you can select tracks that you like don't want to hear anymore. If there's like one that's bugging you, you can shuffle. Basically you're treating it like a playlist, like you would have on Spotify or on an iPod or whatever. In this game, you can go through to the menu and click a track that you want to hear. But besides that, that's as much like accessibility you have to deciding what music is playing when. Which, I don't know, for a game that is using lyrical music, music with lyrics, those can be potentially more taxing on people. Not that they're bad songs, but like it can get a little more repetitious. So, I don't know, that's just something I was thinking about. It'd be nice, since you hear these same tracks over both battles and walking through the city, if you had maybe a little more control over which songs played more often.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a bad idea at all if they could include a little playlist bar, mapped to the D-pad or something where you can flip through songs. Because there's definitely a few points where you're right, you can select, if you buy CDs, you can play the music from your menu, and that becomes your menu music. But then it goes away when you exit the menu. But there was a few times, I'm going to be real, I don't like Screamo. There's one or two Screamo tracks in there I'm just not into, and unless it was a battle, I would actually pretty often pause and then unpause because it would automatically move to a different track if I went to the menu, and so actually I did do that a couple times just to not listen to those ones. But overall, I mean, for me, I think it's great. I think all the arrangements of the original songs are really good. The new stuff is good too, plenty of bops.
Yeah. Kind of just an aside question, Jared. I haven't really had my finger on the TWIWY pulse these last 14 years or so. Would it be fair to call the original a cult classic? Like, its following wasn't a huge following, but it was pretty dedicated, right?
No, that a cult classic is basically a deep impact, but not a wide one. And that's what TWIWY is. Like, very small, not many people played it, but it's really good, and those who played it really liked it. To see a sequel, finally, is so gratifying. I'm so excited. Like, even though it's been a couple weeks, and I'm used to the euphoria of, this new game coming out, I'm still like, oh man, I'm so glad they released this. Like, I'm so glad they developed this and put time into it. Dare I say it, I hope this becomes a franchise, Like, I mean, that could be bad. It could it could turn into Kingdom Hearts. I don't want that necessarily, but I would love it if they just, make more games in the universe,
Right, so the fact that we're living in a world where there really is a sequel is like, this is the universe we wish we would have been in, a decade ago. So it's pretty dope.
I thought the intro to this game was pretty strong. Like, I don't know, maybe when I replay it for a second time, I'll be like, oh, this is kind of slow, I want to get to the action. But for what when I started playing it, I was hooked. I was like really excited. The story was really cool. I felt like they introduced the mechanics at a nice, good rate. Like, they were always adding something new that felt good. I think they're very aware as far as the battle system, because we haven't really talked about that yet. As far as like trying to adapt this very unique thing that was designed for the DS, I think they did a good job. Like, basically on paper, it's all there. You've got the pins, you've got the linking your attacks with the different party members, or in the first game it'd be your partner. And it's really flashy and weird and fun. And even though it's not touchscreen, I think the mapping each attack to a different button is really interesting. And I like that when I swap pins, I have to use different buttons. Like, that actually feels pretty cool.
Yeah, at first I thought it was kind of just a mechanic of, let's make you mash ZL instead of Y. But as you kind of get more into it, and as you have 4 characters in the party, it feels more to me like it's DIY combos. It's like, basically you create different combos. You might discover, oh, this pin is a quick pin, so I can use it to refresh the drop the beat rate, or this one is consistent damage, or this one takes a long time to recharge, but basically you start figuring out these synergies. So I thought that added more to something that looks button mashy. It kind of added more complexity and strategy to it. The fact that you can have these different interactions.
Definitely. Yeah, it's very flashy, but it still feels really good, even if it's not like the most in-depth strategic battle system ever. I started by only equipping the pins that had like the highest damage stat on them, and I still kind of do. I still kind of prioritize that, but also I've just noticed there's certain attacks that feel better for me, that I just like the feel of. There's one where I'd have Minamoto. There's a pin where he dashes, and there's this big green bird animation. I don't know if you've done that one, where he dashes into people. I really liked using that, charging that one up, and then having Fret do like a little spike attack that if you do it enough times, the enemies freeze or explode. And then I always give the slashy slash ones to Rindo. And then Nagi, I keep cycling between like area of effect stuff and just more charge attacks, I guess. What about you? Like, what have you been favoring as far as pins goes?
About the same. I like ones where I can mash more than ones where I have to like charge and hold, just because you have to like think more to charge and hold.
So that's true.
Yeah, I'm still early enough in the game that I'm just kind of mastering the pins as they come. So I think I'm still gonna get into, maybe eventually I'll get into a groove of picking my favorites.
Yeah, no, it feels really good to master them. I kind of like taking those boxes off my checklist. It's like, oh, nice. But then I don't like using mastered pins because
what a waste.
They don't level up. I want to always be leveling up. Yeah, that's kind of something I did a lot with the first game. So it says a lot that they've done that. Well, any other thoughts as far as just impressions so far of the game?
I agree with you that I think that the tutorial kind of teaching aspects have been fast-paced enough that it hasn't really ever gotten in the way. You know, you can revisit learning certain things. I like the pace of that. And I like how many characters were introduced early on in the game.
Quite a few, yeah. I feel like we kind of skimmed over the characters. I mentioned, Fret's my favorite. You like Fret too, but as far as non-playable characters goes, do you have any favorites?
Yes, probably in my top 10 characters that are based around the game of Reversi would be Suzukichi.
I'd be very curious to see what other characters are in that list.
Definitely the top 10, maybe the top 5 if I'm being honest.
Oh my.
Maybe in the top 5. I was proud of myself that I figured out early on when he was like saying discs and like black and white. I was like, this is that one game. This is Reversi or Othello. I was like proud of myself, but then I was less proud when I realized it was like eventually going to become like the gimmick of his boss fight. I was like, oh, so it's not just a secret. It's like pretty over about that. But there are a lot of cliche ways to base to create characters, or somewhat cliched, like, oh, they're obsessed with chess, or, like these character quirks that are kind of redone. I think that's the reason Minamoto was so beloved, was the fact that can, list your top 5 villains that are obsessed with mathematics. Like, probably just the one. So, yes, very fun. Suzukichi, I think, is designed and voice acted in a really fun way.
Yeah, I think the voice acting's been pretty solid across the board. As far as non-playable characters goes for me, I really like Shoka. I think she's kind of a jerk to the team, but
remind me, she's Cat Lady?
Yeah, she's the one in the cat hoodie. I think her voice actress does a really good job. Speaking of things we like, I think we can move on now to our next segment, Star Pieces. Star Pieces is a little segment where we talk about cool details or Easter eggs we or our listeners found. And while we don't have any listener Star Pieces this week, you can send them to us for week 2 of this game at levelwithuspodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on the YouTube version of our show. So as far as Star Pieces go, I will go first. This is kind of dumb, but I really like the food art in this game. I think
pleasing.
It's very yummy. My mouth has watered many times looking at this food art and reading the descriptions. It looks so good. The curry is probably my favorite. Like there's a couple curry restaurants, I think. But ironically, I kind of like the gross ones too. Like by Tipsy Toes Hall, have you been to that one? They serve like a fish head on a plate.
Yeah, and it's upright too. It's like pointing straight upwards.
Right. It's like a barbecue place. I liked that place enough. It gave good stats, so I went there a lot, even though the characters didn't seem to like it very much.
I can't eat any more fish skewers.
You can have the rest. But I went there enough that I leveled it up enough to unlock the secret dish for that place. And it's a fried alligator, like just a full fried alligator from Australia. And so far, it's the most powerful stat boost I've found as far as food goes. It maxes out your meter immediately.
Wow.
I feel bad. I keep feeding it to everyone, but because they all hate it, except for maybe Nagi, who kind of loves it. But yeah, I'd say the food art is my star piece. What's your star piece for the week?
My star piece is just the design, specifically the setting design. The buildings, as you move in the areas, will shift to the side, not just like in a perspective way, but they'll literally warp and stretch in diagonals and interesting ways, which is exactly what they did in the original. But that was 2D, so it was something that maybe wasn't quite as noticeable, but it also kind of played with these perspective things. And this one is just fascinating to like go down an alley in 3D and you watch the distant buildings that you're heading towards like warp into different twisted shapes. I guess no one could like accuse this game of taking a game and just like throwing it in 3D. It is just very stylistically sure of itself. And it may not hit with everyone, but I've been generally impressed by the design of the areas of Shibuya.
Yeah, I mean, if you're adapting stylized 2D art, it's kind of hard to do when you've got just a non-malleable 3D model. So yeah, I kind of got used to it, but you're totally right. Yeah, they do some really interesting things. Well, those were some great star pieces, but now it's time to kind of go the opposite direction in a segment I like to call Quick Jabs.
Jab, 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 jab. 1, 2, and jab, jab.
Quick Jabs is our opportunity to take little lighthearted jabs at the game, because no matter how much we love a game or how much we're enjoying it, there's always something that annoys us. And Marcus, do you want to go first? What's your quick jab?
Okay, so for my quick jab this week, I like it when mechanics and story beats kind of mesh together well. And I feel like there have been a few missed opportunities in this game with the fact that this is a game within a game. So if they wanted to, they could show us the point totals. They could have us interact with point totals. And also these like riddles and stuff in the game could be like more riddles for us, the viewer. Like it feels like a lot of the story's been on kind of on rails, which is fine because they have like a story that they want to tell, but it's kind of come at the expense of like there's some things you kind of just have to go through without any agency. You know, like there are riddles that you can try to solve, but it doesn't really matter because the players are about to solve it for you.
So could you give an example of like a riddle that just didn't do anything for you?
Yeah, on like the second day, I think, they're like, oh, find these 4 stickers, which are 4 different colors, and input them in the right order. So when I was playing it, I was like, all right, green, yellow, red, blue, green, yellow, red, blue. And then we get there and the character's like, okay, so it's green, yellow, red, blue. And I'm like, what? This didn't have to be anything about colors then. Like, it didn't have to be anything that I understood. You could have just had it be, oh, scan these 4 QR codes or something. So basically it was like a little bit of like a prank almost. Like a lot of these riddles, they like tease you with being like, oh, you know, it's a fun riddle that like you are playing a game, so you should solve the riddle. It's like, no, the riddle was just part of the story.
Right.
But the thing is, they're not even interesting enough to like have that be justified, in my opinion. So
that's a good point.
That is my quick jab.
I completely agree. I think it'd be nice if there was more solving involved. Well, Marcus, for my quick jab, I've got a little bit of a hot take. Time travel is stupid.
Hot take.
I don't think it was necessary for them to incorporate it into this game. Like, maybe it'll have some important, like, story significance. Like, maybe they'll find a cool way to use it. But so far, like, it's just felt, like, kind of aggravating whenever we use it. For example, the DRS mission, where they're like, oh no, they all gained up on us. We have to go back in time and prevent all the Deep River Society members from appearing. Like, that chapter took so long. We had to jump to the same places multiple times.
Right. It's like a teleporter almost, right? It's kind of just teleports you to different locations.
Yeah.
I also remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but in that same chapter, there's like a guy who's like clearly distraught, and they're like, should we like imprint on his memory or dive into him? And they're like, we don't have time. And they just keep on walking. And one of the things you have to do is like, oh, we did have time, or oh, that was important to do. It's like, okay.
Sure. Well, it's what stinks is the original TWIWY, like, you're supposed to replay those chapters to find the secret reports and get all the pig noise and just like things like that. But in this game, it's going to be the same. Like, I'm sure we'll have to replay these chapters again, but the time travel, it's making us replay those chapters again, like multiple times. And I don't know, I'm kind of annoyed with it. It just, that mission dragged. I was so ready to move on with the story. So yeah, as a mechanic so far, I can't say I'm a huge fan of it. Well, now that we got that out of our system, like a bolt from the blue, it's time for a Reaper review. This is the quiz segment of our show where Marcus and I will ask each other a question and see if we can't stump each other. And whoever wins gets bragging rights until the next episode.
Yeah, boy.
So I'm going to go first, if that's all right with you.
Please.
All right. Now, Marcus, Neo has a lot of new brands that weren't in the last game, but it does have a few returning brands. So, of the following brands, which one is not present in Neo The World Ends With You?
Ooh.
Wild Boar, Jupiter of the Monkey, Natural Puppy, or Tigray Punks?
Oh, wow.
All of these are brands from the first game, but not all of them are in Neo.
I know the answer, but it took me a second. So Jupiter of the Monkey is right on Rindo's sweatshirts. That one's in. Natural Puppy is in there. It's a store in, I think, 104. And I definitely have equipped a pin that says Tigray Punks on the beginning. But I thought Wild Boar was in there too, but by process of elimination, I'm going to say Wild Boar.
Ding, ding, ding. You are correct. There's actually a brand called Hog Fang that has similar font, I think.
That must be what
I'm
remembering.
I was kind of hoping that would trip you up.
It almost did, because my head, when you said the hog one, I was like, oh, no, I've seen that one. And then you said the other three, I was like, no, I know those ones are in it. So
good job.
Good question. Tricky. Well, Jared, we all know and love beloved best boy Fret, or whatever his Japanese name is. I forget it.
Tosai Furusawa, I think.
Tosai Furusawa. He has a propensity for giving his friends and or enemies nicknames. Jared, could you list off 5 of his nicknames for other characters for me? You hear his nicknames for characters more often than you hear their actual names. So I'm basically asking you to name 5 characters. You can do 2 nicknames for the same character too.
Oh man, I don't know.
If it wasn't hard, it wouldn't be worth it. So
yeah, all right. Rin Dude, Nah Girl, Mr. Minami. Does that count?
I'll accept it. Yes.
I don't remember what else he calls Mr. Minami. I think he just says Mr. Minami. I don't know what he calls Susakichi. I don't know what he calls Shoka. Oh, Shoka. He calls her Shoki? I think he calls her Shoki. Who else is there? The Shiba. I don't know what he calls Susakichi. I really don't. Does he call him just like big guy? Or,
No.
Meatloaf or, I don't know.
That's better.
Kanon. I'm not sure. He usually calls her Kanon, I'm pretty sure. He might call her like pretty lady or something, but no, he usually just says Kanon.
Well, you ready for a couple more nicknames then?
I guess so. I can't.
It sounds like we're getting to that struggle.
Can you
spot.
give me a hint and I'll guess one more? Like, give me a character I missed.
Karya. He says a nickname.
Oh, Karya. He calls him Lollipop, right? No.
That's not the name I have written down.
Okay.
That's a good one though.
All right, I failed. Go ahead.
Well, Karya, he calls Candyman.
Oh. Okay.
Maybe that's a one-time use, so that was probably tricky. Suzukichi, he calls Suzy K.
Oh, Suzy K, of course. Yeah. How could I forget that?
He also calls Minamimoto Minaman or Minaman.
Yeah, I don't remember that as much as Mr. Benami, but fair enough.
And he calls Nagi, in addition to Nagirl, boss.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'll be honest, I don't know all of the nicknames, but I did have like 6 written down. So
5 of 6. It should have been 4, man. Well done. That was actually a really good question. That was, despite it not being that long since I played, I kind of forgot a lot of those. So, well, we are getting close to the end of this podcast, but that means it's time for our final segment, which is called Rabbit Holes. This is the one dedicated portion at the end of our podcast where we get to chat about our newest interests or internet rabbit holes that we've gone down lately, and we both get to share one thing that we enjoy or would recommend to each other. And this is at the end of the podcast, so if you're not interested in this, people are free to skip.
We don't have low self-esteem. We just value your time as a listener.
That's right. You're welcome.
Jared, please tell me, what rabbit holes have you fallen down?
I've fallen deep down into a rabbit hole of a website called 11foot8.com. There is a bridge that is nicknamed the Can Opener by its fans. Yes, this bridge has fans. I forgot what state it's in. It's like North Carolina or something. But it's 11'8", and then they raised it to 12'4", but it hasn't changed what this bridge does. And what this bridge does is, it's called the Can Opener because trucks that aren't paying attention to the height limit go underneath and get the top of the truck just comes unravels. It just gets scraped completely off. The bridge just eats it. It just goes, and there's literally, I think, hundreds or like 150 videos of like security footage, all dedicated to watching this bridge and watching how many trucks get eaten by this bridge. And I think this is really entertaining because, number one, no one gets hurt in these videos. Like, they're pretty humane. But you are watching pretty amazing destruction happen too, because these truck drivers, it's their job to know height limits. Like,
you idiots.
Basically, I mean, that's what all the comments are saying on the videos. But it's just really fun. I have a couple favorites. It's just like fun to replay them and watch these trucks just get crunched up. It's been great. It brings me joy. Well, Marcus, what rabbit hole did you go down this week?
This week and also like this year, World Chase Tag. One might correctly assume that I am not much of a sports person. In fact, one of my coworkers recently, we were putting together a bracket for a non-sports related thing. And as we were putting together the bracket, he was like, so this is how sports works. Yada, 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 yada. And I was like, man, most people you wouldn't be able to get away with saying the sentence, so in sports, ... But his assumption was unfortunately completely accurate. However, that being said, not being the hugest sports fan, World Chase Tag is a pretty small niche sport where it's basically tag. There are 2 players on the court, but the court is covered in bars and platforms, and all of these athletes are parkour athletes. So they're not just like running around in circles seeing who's faster. They're also, juking to the right and to the left. They're jumping over platforms or under, like occasionally you'll see a flip. It's fascinating for me because the hard things about sports, following sports, can be understanding what's happening in the game. Well, this one is pretty clear. Understanding kind of the meta narratives or the stories of the players. Well, in this one, since it's one-on-one and they're playing on behalf of these fairly small teams, you can kind of follow these narratives. Also, some sports aren't very fast-paced to watch. This one is extremely fast because every round is only 20 seconds. It's just really exciting to watch. I would recommend anyone look up World Chase Tag highlights and see if it's your jam. It's just very fun to see skilled athletes use parkour, which is, most people think of that as being a thing to look cool. It's cool to see kind of the utility aspect of those skills. So, it's fun stuff.
Definitely. That's really cool. Have you tried telling your sporty coworker about World Chase Tag?
Yeah, I actually showed it to him. And he was like, dude, this is giving me anxiety or something.
He's like, dude, this isn't sports.
Yeah, I mean, he was classy enough to not gatekeep my sport as not a good enough sport.
Oh, so you're saying what he did is he patted you on the head and like, good try.
He's like,
that's
yeah,
almost
he was a
sports.
little patronizing, but I'll accept it. I'll keep my little World Chase tab close to my heart. It has been on ESPN, and if that doesn't make a sport, I don't know what does.
All right, it's time to wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this podcast. Next week, we're going to be back with week 2 of Neo, The World Ends With You. And as I mentioned before, if you have anything you'd like us to read on the podcast, go ahead and send it to us at levelwithuspodcast@gmail.com or comment on the YouTube version of this show. But until then, I'm Jared.
I'm Marcus.
And we'll level with you next week. Thanks for leveling with us. The funky music cover of Calling you heard was provided with permission by LegendAV. You can find the full version over on his YouTube channel. You also heard ZigZag by Kevin MacLeod on Incompetech.com. All other original music was composed by Marcus. Thanks, Marcus.
You know what else brings me joy is that encouraging thought that no matter how successful you and I get, no matter how much quality content we put out there, we will never have as many fans as that bridge.
You're actually probably right.
A bridge will always be more interesting than you or me.
Yeah. At the end of our lives, in our old age, we will travel to that bridge and we'll reconcile with it. We'll leave it some flowers and leave as friends.
I constantly compared myself to you, but now I realize that I could never compete. Bridges aren't about competition. They're about connection. Making it from point A to point B. This is a good anime idea.